morning. The news gang is here. On the show tonight, Uhuru surprised new sheriff at Treasury. Does he really know what he's getting into? Going under, drowning, swept away, water everywhere, not a dam to show for it. And that is a damn complicated story. Well, we'll also have the take, the kicker, the punchline, and the angle, but with a twist. Jamila's memo is back next week. Of course, Jamila as well. Now, let's start with this little matter of the president not being able to print money. That is how he was telling off the governors today, and we have actually part of what the president had to say.
So jameni, tafadhalini, magavana, tumieni ile mko naye kwanza sawa. Ya? Sisi wote tupambane na ufisadi, badala ya pesa kuingia mifuko ya wachache na kunonesha tumbo zao. Fanyenieni wananchi kazi. Sisi hatuna pesa. Tumewagawia kulingana na ile ambaye iko. Hatuwezi kwenda kuunda pesa. Hatuna factory ya kuunda pesa. Tunaelewana? Pesa ni jasho ya wananchi, na ile iko ndio inaweza kutumika. We cannot get more than that. Kwa hivyo na waomba kwa heshima kubwa magavana wetu na maseneta wetu, mwacheni mastori mingi, chukueni ile ambaye iko, muanze kazi. Wananchi wanangojea miradi.
Gachuri.
Oh yes.
This is it.
I knew you would start with me, and I know the reason why.
And why wouldn't I?
and I know the reason why you would.
I was almost saying that he was speaking in a county near yours, but
actually yes, a neighboring county, but a story for another day. But it also reminds me of what we said here last week, that it has gotten to a point where the national government, the president specifically, is telling the governors and the senators, take this or shauri yenu. Maybe we didn't say such last week, but clearly it has got to a point where the president is saying this is the amount of money that we have.
And instructive that the National Assembly passed it within an hour or so after the president spoke, like it was almost like clockwork.
Yes, but you see, there are two issues here. Number one, is the president telling the truth in terms of how much money the government has and how much money the government can give to county governments? Number two, governors, will they be satisfied with the amount of money that they are getting, bearing in mind that they have already filed an application at the Supreme Court seeking an advisory opinion on various issues relating to this division of revenue? Now, the division of revenue bill, the second one now, because the first one collapsed, is going to the Senate. So will the senators agree with the National Assembly on the 316.5 billion shillings proposed allocation to county governments? You see, if they decide that that is not enough and decide to amend it, we will go to a mediation. And if the mediation fails, we go back to where we were the other day, republish the bill, and the cycle continues. In the meantime, what happens? County governments have no money, and that means there are no salaries for workers in the county governments, there are no services, there's no development. So it's a question of how much can they pull apart, and whether sense will eventually prevail. Governors will say, okay, let's take this, work with it. If you find some more money, there's a provision for a supplementary budget thereafter.
Yvonne, did I see some kind of mellowing a little bit by the governors? I mean, when the COG chair spoke in Naivasha, I think it was, in response to what the president said, he was less combative. I mean, governors have been marching on the streets and doing all these things, but tonight he was saying, well, we've handed that matter to the two houses of parliament, and that is where it is.
And which is interesting because, you know, the president took a rather different tone. Sisi hatuna pesa, we can't print money, you know, take it or leave it. And it's coming at a time when also the Senate passed its own bill. Remember the one that they introduced, and everybody talking about the illegality. And the interesting thing is, with all of this push and pull,
the National Assembly has
dismissed as a non-event.
Actually,
and
they call
themselves
it a
are passing
piece of paper.
There you go. And at a time when also the governors are themselves warning of delays in salaries and everything at the counties because because of this stalemate. It is interesting because remember we heard that the president was the one who actually called for the second informal sort of channels that got them to the 316.5, which then had them republish the bill. But now it just looks like governors and senators go to court. The president says this is all we have. I mean, I think it was an interesting tone because he was much milder, and especially because this is a matter between the two houses of Parliament, and as well that is at the Supreme Court. But we only wait to see whether now, with such different stances being taken, how will they come to sit down at the negotiating table?
But interesting, Linus, that the president should wade into this at a time when the matter is pending before court, and there is something actually going on in Parliament. What's going on with him? What point is that he has reached?
Actually, watching him speak today in Gatanga reminded me of President Daniel Arap Moi in his last term at the height of frustration with the teachers.
Hakuna pesa.
He said, I still remember he was very angry and he said, hakuna pesa, hakuna pesa, hakuna pesa. It was three times. And I thought, oh, okay, that is Uhuru's moment as well, because such moments do come for presidents. Now, the difference here is going to be the kind of arrangement that exists. Public finance is now a process that is guided properly by the Constitution. It's no longer really in the hands of the president. It's not about the magnanimity of the president or generosity of the president in terms of allocating the counties. The CRA had negotiated an amount, and I think it's 335 billion shillings. And then I think the first mediation produced a 327 billion compromise, which was rejected again, and that is where the matters are. I think what the president will find himself in is a situation where he has to argue, not politically, but with the Constitution. And that is what the Supreme Court is bound to do next week, to interpret the role of CRA, to interpret the role of National Assembly, the role of the Senate, and hopefully guide especially the National Assembly and the Senate in how to reach an amount.
But I wonder why he would go that far. I mean, what's really going on that the president would, in a sense, ignore what's going on in court and what's going on in Parliament, because it's really, quite frankly, not in his place to decide what goes to the counties or what doesn't.
Yeah, but and I guess he's also just sort of basing that on, remember, all of this money that goes to the counties is money that has been generated by the national government, in a sense. So it's what monies that have been collected by the national government, which they then say, okay, and according to the Constitution, this amount remains at the national level, this one goes to the counties. But you notice how the governors then had a more subdued tone after the president, and the president was quite passionate, to put it lightly and to put it modestly. But yes, the monies do come from what the national government has been able to collect, and because the counties are in a sort of inferior position in this debate, because they're not yet able to, I mean, we're still in the early stages of devolution, so they're not yet able to generate as much revenue as they'd like. So in a sense, they're still very dependent on the money that is collected by the national government that is headed by the president, and therefore he can say, well, this is all the money we've generated and this is what's coming.
Remember,
to
all the taxes,
maybe they
all
would
the
be more
taxes come
powerful
to
if there were only 10 governors, maybe.
Perhaps.
Yes, I was just saying, I mean, all the taxes, wherever they're paid, come to the national government.
Yes.
So the suggestion that counties need to work to produce more is actually one that will
There's
create
no
a
part of the country that doesn't belong to some county.
Exactly.
And the people in those counties pay the taxes anyway.
Yes,
so.
And watching Wycliffe Oparanya responding today, it was very calm. And I think he was just saying, Mr. President, have you read the Constitution?
Like, it's really not up to you to...
Yeah, it's not really up to you.
Yeah. So very quickly, Francis, because I want us to move to the Treasury.
Yes,
where all the money is.
Absolutely. And there's something that probably the president was saying that we didn't maybe clearly hear. What he was basically telling the county governors is, look for money in your counties and supplement it with what you get from the national government. And the general argument from the National Treasury, from the national government and the National Assembly is, we are using the 2014-2015 finance books.
Yeah.
And so, what the county governments are getting is a 30.5% allocation. And so the argument is the Constitution requires us to give or to allocate to county governments 15%. So the national government is arguing, we have given you 30%.
Based
double.
on what?
Based on the 2014, 2015.
That's 4-5 financial years ago.
Which is the law, by the way.
Which is the law.
Yeah.
Technically, I mean,
So,
because
so the governors probably
will
will be
catching
told.
up with a year.
Yeah, so probably the governors will be told, talk to your National Assembly members to hasten the process of auditing these books, so that you can get the financial allocation from the very latest books. But also, the judiciary is also a recipient of this same money from the national government. So there's also a carrot and stick kind of affair to the judiciary. So if you give them more, then we will also take from you to give them. And that is exactly what he was also telling the National Assembly guys and the senators, that if you want to give them more, reduce your salaries, reduce the allocation to Parliament, and give them more if you want to. A very catchy situation.
Interesting. I would like us to move, staying on that, on the money, as it were, and let's go to Treasury. And some interesting developments this week, ladies and gentlemen. Henry Rotich, after much speculation, finally was in the dock with, of course, his PS and quite a number of people, 28 people in total, actually. And we will talk about that in a moment. But the president, some would say out of nowhere, picks Ukuri Yatani to be the man, the new sheriff at Treasury. Some people have called him dark horse, wild card, and surprise pick, and all manner of things. But bottom line is that he is probably the last person people expected to see there. Where did that come from, Linus? What was that about?
Even Ukuri Yatani appeared surprised. Completely fitting the descriptions that are being given. Truly a wild card. Nobody expected it to go that way. What is the quantity of Ukuri Yatani? He is new, first time in the cabinet. Remember, he served single terms as member of parliament first,
as
a single term as governor. Quite clearly, a single term as CS
as ambassador as well.
Ambassador. And yes, he's done single terms. He doesn't have a very long history in the public service. Now, some may find the appointment quite underwhelming and not indicative of Uhuru Kenyatta's either power structure or governance structure. World over, the Ministry of Finance or Treasury reflects basically the thought of the center.
Yeah.
It's for right-hand men. It's for the people who worked with Uhuru Kenyatta to get where they are, which is go to government. I mean, you look at a place like the UK in the days of Tony Blair, and you would see it comes in with Gordon Brown, and they are political equals in a way. Finance docket is very, very important. It's supposed to be a peer's position. Somebody who is so authoritative, can tell the president things, can guide the president.
And tell him off.
And tell him off when necessary. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ukuri Yatani telling President Kenyatta off, guiding President Kenyatta. I doubt that at this stage.
I think on a political level, this probably made sense on a number of fronts. So one, because obviously there would be discomfort with the Ruto supporters and with his allies, even in politics. So he had to pick somebody that was sort of the wild card, if you like. And I'm trying to avoid using the tribal thing, but most people would understand that balance. But then also, people were saying, well, there was a couple of PSs, and you know whose name came up, that could have been used. But then, would he risk going through parliamentary vetting when his own party is divided? That would be difficult. Perhaps he might have the support of ODM now with the handshake, but this was a bloodbath that he would do well to completely avoid. And even though there was a bit of noise, about it, like, it should have been replaced by one of our own, and, from our side of government, or our side of the union, as you like, this was just absolutely the safest for him in terms of politics. Just
and Francis, some people are saying that Ukuri Yatani could warm that seat for quite some time.
Absolutely. Put it this way, I think Ukur is a safe choice for now. Why? Because either way, the president was on the spotlight. If you, let's say, picked James Macharia to act in the National Treasury docket, people would have asked, oh, okay, so you have removed
Our
and
person.
replaced with,
Yes.
yeah. If, let's say, he picked any other person, there would have been questions. But for Ukur, it's a question of safety. At least both ends of the divide in the national government, or in the cabinet, to explicitly put it that way, kind of feel safe with that choice. But now the question is, it's what you keep saying, kicking the can down the road. Because eventually a decision will have to be made, whether to confirm Ukur Yatani in the National Treasury or to pick someone else and present that name to the National Assembly for vetting.
But
however,
it helps that there's no timeline, right?
yes,
that's what,
he can act
He can
forever
act
for as long as maybe the
Even until
situation,
technical, even until the end
Yes.
of
his
his term.
absolutely, for as long as the situation remains as is in the Jubilee administration. Because truth be told, there are two sides. No matter how much the leaders try to tell us, oh, we are united, what they say and what they do, or what the situation is, are two very different things. But let us focus more on the choice of Dr. Julius Mwea, the PS National Treasury. That was a substantive appointment. There is no vetting because he was already a PS in the national planning.
And he's not acting.
He's not acting. So basically, there's somebody now in charge at the National Treasury. The PS being the accounting officer and the person who does a lot of general administrative work in the ministry is substantively there. So you can as well say,
so he's a man to watch.
yeah, you can substantively say Dr. Kamau Thuge is out of the way, clearly and completely. Rotich still there, but I highly doubt he will come back. But the Ukur Yatani choice for me was to him a safe bet for now. Maybe to watch the situation. If the situation changes, maybe he can nominate someone else.
Oh, interesting. Yes, yes.
Safety from what?
Political.
Safety from what? Because in the recent history, there is no president that has had so much political space than President Uhuru Kenyatta. President Uhuru Kenyatta has no active opposition.
Some would say he does.
He does from within.
Within
right?
Jubilee.
Hold on, he's never tested it.
Yeah.
This was the moment to say, let me test it and do something interesting. Replace Henry Rotich with a pick from the Rift Valley and see how that goes. Take Esther Koimet there. She's
Her
very
name
qualified.
was
I mean, and then it's an opportunity for the country to also break this ceiling. There's never been a finance head, female head, since independence. Henry Rotich, I think, was the 14th Minister of Finance, and we've never had a woman. There are a lot of very qualified women. This was an opportunity for President Kenyatta to test that so-called internal opposition. He has never tested it. All we are doing is to interpret the external factors.
Some people say
Would it be
probably
too big a risk for him?
It is a risk, but a risk he can afford. He's a second-term president. What is at stake? Only the legacy. He doesn't need re-election. He can take these risks. He's got the opposition behind his back. I mean, we had Mbadi here speaking, and you would think he's part of the administration. The Honorable Raila Odinga is working with him very, very closely. This consequential opposition is out of the way. The president has a lot of space to do some of those bigger experiments. He should have tried this moment and see how it goes.
Linus, actually,
And
there have been two
we have to take a break,
indirect,
Francis.
even as we take it, there have been two indirect tests of the internal rift or internal opposition in Jubilee. Let me cite the instances. You remember the finance bill of the taxation of fuel. You remember the 18%, the 16%, 8%, the VAT
Yes.
issue.
Right.
You all witnessed what happened in the House that day, and a lot of opposition around it. Yet this was deemed to be a government position, a ruling party position. That was the first instance. The second instance, you remember the discussion around KQ takeover at JKIA. What happened? That matter had to be shelved because of the now internal opposition within Jubilee. So probably using those two instances, it would have been too big a risk to take a nominee to the House without the consensus within Jubilee. Otherwise, maybe the name would have been pushed through because of the numbers. All you need is a simple majority. But the fact that there would have been open defiance was another matter altogether. But
both instances you've cited, both the VAT and the KQ, out here were also not very popular issues. Yeah. So it was very, very easy to sell it out here in the public. What would you sell as a parliament by opposing a candidature of an appointee, a ministerial appointee? And I mentioned Esther Komet as an example. You're very experienced, long time in finance, in treasury. What reason would be out here? What can you use out here to say, let's fight the president with?
Well, I think lots of questions that some of which have been swept away by dams, but we'll discuss.
Yes.
Before we come back,
I just want to read this comment from Catherine Muma. She's the former commissioner at CIC. Yeah. She says there are no two audiences for tax purposes in Kenya, so the revenue collected is for both levels of government and not for the national government to decide. Correct. I think Treasury should not be a national government institution because it always frustrates counties. It should be an independent institution that will respect the Constitution and the value of both levels of government.
All right. We are going under. We'll be back.